how much responsibility does the individual have? Because kind of like the dark side of liberalism is, infinite choice. It's infinite responsibility as well, which is something that people try to downplay because, I think a lot of the negativity that we have in public discourse is that we're constantly putting under the rug the responsibility, the flip side of the coin of freedom, of this, unfettered choice type freedom that we're all enjoying. And then we're in that meme with Spider-Man where we're just pointing fingers at each other, like who's actually going to be holding the bag with this, with the downside of responsibility. So for women, like I feel like a lot of modern feminism, the consumer feminism is essentially women chafing at their role in this mechanized society, and then trying to figure out, okay, why does this feel bad? Why is this not good? And a lot of it is essentially them, wrestling with nature, but there is no explanation. Their worldview does not accept nature. It's all about the individual and choice and all this type of stuff. So it's men because they're the antagonist in this perpetual Tom and Jerry tomfoolery. So I'm curious what you think about that. That it's there's the dark side. There's responsibility in all of this, and we're very bad at noticing it.
No, totally. I mean, I completely agree. I think that's a brilliant question. And I think a lot of it, so in the book, I have this word like puritanical, which is a combination of prurient and puritanical. So to describe this culture that on the one hand encourages excess and, says you should be sexy and sexual and, explore all your desires. But on the other hand, if you get it wrong, then you're like moral enemy, so like the flip side of a culture that encourages this sort of, hedonistic behavior, but at the same time has often incomprehensible rules about if someone goes wrong, and we're not even talking about legal wrongs, maybe there's a lot of interpersonal stuff that is sort of in a gray area, but, then the question of blame, it's like, oh, well, this person is to blame. This person is a terrible person that, suddenly someone becomes like, figured in this way. And it is, I think, partly to do with this, actually failure to deal with, as you say, the flip side of freedom, which is responsibility. So nobody wants to take responsibility when something goes wrong. And at the same time, despite kind of wittering about patriarchy, actually, we don't have a great deal of like patriarchs in the sense, or patriarchal culture in the sense of, men taking responsibility, right? Patriarchy is not just stealing things from women or whatever. And in fact, it's not that at all. It's like the patriarchs are basically the men who are responsible for others. Like in the Bible, for example, they're the men who have huge families and so on. And in a way, like there is a kind of death of the father in the sense that nobody wants to be the adult in the room. Like nobody wants to say, hang on, you shouldn't do that. It's not good for you. Because it's kind of boring. It's like being the party people. Like to be the adult, you have to say, no, there are limits. I'm doing this to protect you. So now you have situations where people are saying, well, my child knows best. And you're like, no, they don't. Like, no, you know better. Like, you really should know better. And so I think that, and you can think about this in relation to boomers. The Helen Andrews book is very good on this point. Like, and read Michelle Welbeck and, the kind of hollowing out of that kind of adultness that would involve responsibility, that would involve like the father, for example, taking on the role of being responsible for women and children, the perhaps historically necessary eradication or erosion of that role has ended up in a situation where everyone is like brother and sister. Like, and this is the thesis of this book called Society Without the Father by Mitte Schlick, who's a very interesting sort of psychologist. So that basically what you have is sibling rivalry. There are no adults and children, they're just like brothers and sisters, basically. So men and women are kind of competing with each other rather than engaging in to sort of different but equal forms of like mutual support and relation on the basis of their differential capacities and qualities. And sexual difference, of course, poses that question. It's like saying men and women are different, like, and their difference is what's necessary. And when women sort of are encouraged to behave more like men, like in the Ladette example, I mean, that's a kind of silly example in a way, but it is part of this, is also to like potentially deny their own nature, and that this is somehow this never works out well for women. I think it's always recuperated back into like what's better for capitalism or whatever, so it's better for capital that women work as well, because then they don't have to pay a family wage and they can pay everyone less. And this isn't feminism's fault, but it's a kind of incidental like cost of that position.
It also feels to me that a lot of times kind of feminism becomes a theory that is a descriptor of a certain moment that was brought about by technology, rather than, because a lot of people think, okay, the suffragettes, kicked off a movement that through its, theoreticians has, seeded this idea that women, and kind of like all the dominoes fell afterwards. But I feel like, maybe technology, techno capital was one step ahead before the theoreticians, and already kind of laying the groundwork of what this looks like. And then they were observing and describing what was already happening, because this essentially wouldn't work without this relationship of the liberal liberated woman would not work in a vacuum. This is completely contingent on how technology relates to women.
Yeah, including the vacuum cleaner. I'm reminded associatively by by your use of the word vacuum. No, I agree, and it's so the question of how constructed those different positions are by the technologies is a crucial one. But this is why I think this kind of pendulum swing that maybe we're seeing, back towards a defense of sexual difference. And, when we're talking about human nature, I mean, it's also in our nature to use tools, right? So we're a technological species. So it's not like the technology is sort of somehow not us. It is us. It's us as well. It's everything that we collectively have come up with. Whether we should have done or not is another question. But morality always lags behind technology as well. It's like, well, if you can do it, why not? That's the morality of technology. And of course we can talk about the specific kinds of women that something like the contraceptive pill has created. Women are also then the product of these chemical interventions, like in very serious ways. We know that it changes the kind of men that women fancy, and obviously it changes how women are oriented towards the workforce and so on. And I can absolutely imagine a very large scale, widespread backlash against the sexual liberalism or sexual liberation of the mid 20th century and the technology that accompanied it. I sort of feel like this is coming. And I do wonder about like Zoomers. I think that maybe they will rebel against the internet. I think for those people who've had their whole life on the internet so far, including lockdown, including school, including, it will become associated with everything that sucks. And that there will be kind of a breakout towards nature. Like everyone will start getting obsessed with the Unabomber manifesto again, hopefully not doing what he did in terms of sending bombs, but, like turning against industrial society and towards back to nature and to the wild and to their own nature as well, without big pharma, without intervention, without these sorts of things.